I moved into a house on Graymont Street in late November, when the city was getting dark too early and the rain had been going on for days. It was one of those old apartment buildings that look atmospheric in photos, but in reality, as if someone's past mistake still lives there. High ceilings, cracked tiles in the lobby, a long hallway on each floor, and lamps that glowed yellow, as if someone specifically wanted to make people look more tired than they were. I rented apartment 6B for almost nothing. The realtor explained it simply. The neighborhood is not the best, and the house is old, but it's quiet. He said it as if the quiet was an advantage. I was even happy on the first day. After the noisy neighbor in the previous apartment, this quiet seemed like a luxury. There was another apartment opposite my door, 6C, but the door to it was strange. No number, no doormat, no doorbell, just a flat, dark gray door with paint applied over the old wood so carelessly that the outline of the old sign could be seen through it. I thought then that the apartment was empty or closed for renovation. The first 3 days were ordinary. I unpacked boxes, ordered cheap food, set up the internet, and tried to get used to the faint sounds that old houses make, the crackling of pipes, the clatter of the elevator, the dull hum of the ventilation at night. On the 4th night, I saw the light under the door opposite for the first time. It was 2:17. I woke up because I wanted water. The hallway in the apartment was dark, but through the peephole in the door, I noticed a thin strip of pale, warm light under door 6C. I stopped. I don't know why. Maybe because I had never seen any movement there in all that time. Maybe because it looked unnatural at this hour. Not as if someone was just awake, but as if someone was standing very close to the door and not moving. I stared at the peephole for a long time until I got tired of it. Then I walked away, drank some water, and went to bed. In the morning, the light was out. I almost forgot about it at work, but in the evening when I got back, I happened to ask the concierge, an elderly woman named Mary, "Does anyone live in the apartment across from me?" She looked up from her crossword puzzle. "Across from you?" "Yes, 6C. She didn't answer right away. She just stared at me for a few seconds, as if wondering if I was joking. "There's no 6C on the 6th floor, she said. I smiled. "Yes, it just doesn't have a number on the door." She slowly put down the handle. Boy, there were 3 apartments on one side and 2 on the other on the 6th floor. 12 years ago, after a fire, one section was closed. Some of it was rebuilt. Some of it was filled in with concrete. There's nothing where you see the door. I felt the smile disappear on its own. I was literally looking at that door this morning. So I was looking at the old panel. It hadn't been removed. That's what happens here. She said it too quickly, and immediately went back to her crossword puzzle. The conversation was over for her, not for me. That night, I took the elevator up specifically and stood in front of that door before I went into my room. It was real enough to cast a shadow on it. I even touched it with my knuckles. Wood, hard, cold. I knocked. The sound wasn't what it should have been if the door were concrete. It was dull, hollow, as if there was a small space behind it. I knocked again, and a second later I heard a very soft knock in response. Just one. I jerked my hand away so hard that I almost hit my back against my door. I just stood there for half a minute, not moving. Then I put my ear to the door. There was no sound from inside, no footsteps, no breathing, no television. Just silence. So deep, as if it was listening to me too. I went into my room, locked the door, and told myself it was the pipes, the house shrinking, an accident, whatever. But I barely slept all night. At 3:13, I heard someone walking down the hall. The footsteps were slow, measured. They were approaching from the elevator, stopping somewhere in front of my door, and they didn't go any further. I sat up in bed. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then 3 soft knocks on my door. Not loud, not aggressive, very polite. I didn't answer. A minute later, there was a faint scraping sound, as if someone had run their fingers along the outside of the door, slowly, from top to bottom. Then the footsteps continued down the hallway and stopped right where the wall at the end of the section should have been. The next day, I checked the camera by the elevator. The building had an old system, but the recordings from the last few days were still there. Mary wouldn't show them to me, but I lied about losing a package. The hallway was empty on the 3:13 recording. The elevator wouldn't open. No one was getting out. No one came in. But at exactly 3:13:07, the light in the hallway, directly opposite my door, blinked, and a shadow appeared on the floor. Just a shadow. It was as if someone was standing out of frame, out of sight of the camera. Tall, still, too dark even for the dim light. And 5 seconds later, the shadow was gone. I asked Mary to rewind again, and again. She watched silently. Then she turned off the monitor and said, "Don't open it if you hear a knock after 3. "What? Just don't open it." "Are you kidding? I wouldn't joke about this floor." She got up and went into the utility room, leaving me alone in front of the black screen. That night, I went to a friend's house. He said there was something wrong with the pipes in the house, that it was noisy. In fact, I just didn't want to go back. But living on someone's couch forever is impossible. 2 days later, I was back in my apartment, and I realized almost immediately that I had made a mistake. On the floor under the door was a folded sheet of paper. Not a postal message, not an advertisement. An ordinary sheet of paper, folded in half. Inside was written only one sentence in block letters. "You looked through the peephole too long." I reread it 10 times. Then I turned the sheet over. Nothing. No signature. I ran out into the corridor. Silence. The door opposite was closed, but light was seeping in from under it again. This time it wasn't warm. Whitish, cold, like in hospital rooms or basements. I don't know what switched on in my head at that moment, fear or stubbornness. I walked up to the door of 6C, pressed my palm against the wood and said, "Who's there?" There was no answer. I repeated louder, "This isn't funny. If anyone lives here, tell me." There was a soft click behind the door. Then I heard a voice, not right behind the door, further on, as if from the other side of the long corridor. "You've been here before," the voice said. It sounded calm, masculine, dry. Yes, as if it were stating a fact. "No," I whispered, though I didn't understand why I was answering. "I have been," the voice repeated. "You all say no at first." I stepped back. My chest went cold. "What does that mean?" Something seemed to be moving slowly behind the door. Not footsteps. More like the sound of fabric on the wall. And then the voice said, almost in a whisper, "Don't stand in front of the door when the light is on." My mouth went dry. "Why?" A very long pause. "Because then it sees you in the right place." And the light under the door went out. I don't remember how I got into the apartment. I just remember locking all the locks, pulling a chair up to the door, and sitting on the floor until morning without turning on the light. In the morning, I decided to find information about the fire. If Mary wasn't lying, there had to be at least an article, a mention, something. And I found it. Local newspaper archives, 12 years ago. Headline: Fire in Graymont Building. 1 section closed, 3 missing. The article said that the fire had started late at night on the 6th floor. The exact cause was not determined. Some of the residents were evacuated. The fire was quickly extinguished, but 3 people from apartment 6C were missing. No bodies. No clear answers. Just disappeared. A man, a woman, and their son. The last sentence in the article stuck with me the most. Several residents reported that after the fire was contained, the lights in apartment 6C continued to turn on and off for about an hour, even though the electricity on the floor had been turned off. There was also a photo of the house that night. Part of the facade had burned, and there was indeed a light on in one window on the 6th floor. I zoomed in on the photo. There was a figure standing in the window. Not clearly blurry, but there it was. Too tall for a child. Too thin for an adult. And it wasn't looking down at the firefighters. It was looking to the side, as if at something inside the apartment. After that, I started to notice something else. The apartment was colder near the front door, not just a draft. The temperature dropped so sharply that in the morning a thin line of condensation would appear on the inside of the metal. And sometimes, standing in the hallway, I would hear the sound of the TV behind my wall. Only my living room didn't border on another apartment, but on that closed section. One evening I turned off everything in my house and leaned a glass against the wall. It was a stupid old trick from the movies, but it worked. There was indeed sound from that side, a hiss, then fragments of voices, like someone switching channels on a very old TV. In a second I made out a woman's laughter, a child's cough, a fragment of an advertisement, then more hiss. And then I heard my name clearly, not loudly, almost affectionately. I let go of the glass. The knock repeated itself at night, exactly at 3:13, 3 times. I didn't go to the door. I sat on the bed, clutching the phone, ready to call the police, even though I knew exactly what that would sound like. Then a voice came, this time not from the hallway, right from the front door. Don't look through the peephole. I froze. It's not where a person should be standing. 2 things were fighting inside me: the desire to survive and the desire to make sure I wasn't going crazy. I did what all characters in movies do before everything goes wrong. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. I was about to flinch, but I saw something below, at the very bottom of the image, like a piece of something dark. I leaned closer, and I realized that I wasn't looking at something on the floor. I was looking at the top of someone's head. Someone was standing close to the door on the outside, but so close that the lens of the peephole only caught part of the top of their head and an eye. One eye, raised unnaturally high, as if the head were tilted back at an impossible angle. It was looking straight at me. I jumped back with a scream and fell to the floor. At that moment, someone hit the door with such force that the lock rattled. Then again, and again, not with a fist, as if with my whole body. I screamed that I would call the police, but the blows suddenly stopped. Instead, I heard a soft, childish voice from the other side. Dad says if you let us in, we'll be like people again. And then, a woman's laugh, very soft, almost content. I waited for dawn and was about to leave for good. But while I was packing, I heard a knock from inside the wall in the living room. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. As if someone was in the cavity between the apartments. I called the police. They came, examined the door of the hallway, my apartment. They found nothing. One of the officers even knocked on the door of 6C and said that, judging by the sound, it really wasn't solid concrete behind it. But without permission from the management company, they wouldn't break the wall. The management company sent a repairman the next day. A bald man named Donovan, who acted as if nothing in the house had ever surprised him. He stared at the door opposite for a long time in silence, then said, "That should have been removed back then." "What exactly is that?" He looked at me. "A false passage. After the fire, part of it was boarded up, but the outer panel was left. The old frame made it look like there was an apartment there. Seems like it." He took out a screwdriver and began to remove the trim. I stood nearby and shone my phone. The wooden frame was indeed a false one. A few minutes later, he grabbed the edge of the panel and pulled it towards him. Behind it was not concrete. There was a narrow, dark passage, about 1 meter deep. And then another door, older, burned around the edges. And now with the number 6C, blackened but still visible. The hallway smelled like it hadn't been aired in decades. Not rot, not smoke. Something dry and hot and old. Like a box of things that had been opened after many years. Only much worse. Donovan swore very quietly. "That's impossible," he said. "This shouldn't be here. You said yourself that the section was boarded up." "It was. I was still working here then." We both looked at that inner door. There were scratches on it. Long, vertical scratches. Lots of them. I swallowed. "Is that from the fire?" "No," Donovan said. "It's from nails." He shouldn't have said it in his normal voice, but he did. As if he were checking the condition of a pipe or wiring. On the floor in front of the old door was a child's ball. Red. Faded. Covered in dust. And it swayed a little. As if it had just stopped. Donovan whispered, "We'll close this right now." But before he could step back, the inner door slowly swung inward. Not abruptly. Not with a thud. Very slowly, with a long wooden creak. Beyond them was darkness. Not just a dark apartment. Real thick darkness, in which the phone's flashlight seemed to drown, not reaching beyond the threshold. And from there came the sound of the television. The same one. Hissing. Switching channels. Fragments of old commercials. Then a man's voice. "You're late!" Donovan jumped back, hitting the wall and dropping his tools. I couldn't move. Everything inside me seemed to freeze. A light appeared in the darkness. At first it was faint, as if someone had turned on a desk lamp in a distant room. Then it grew brighter, and I saw the outline of the hallway of apartment 6C. Wallpaper, a coat hanger, children's shoes by the wall. Everything looked as if they were still living there, as if the fire had never happened. And at the very end of the corridor stood a woman. I couldn't see her face. Only a silhouette in a dress, motionless, with her arms down. Next to her was a little boy. And behind them, a little further, in the depths of the apartment, stood something third. Very tall. Too tall for the ceiling. He had to bend down a little to fit in the corridor. At that moment, the boy raised his hand and waved at me. Not cheerfully. Slowly. As if to someone he had known for a long time. "He lives across the street now," said a child's voice. The woman answered almost gently, "Then let him come in." And the tall figure in the depths moved. She didn't move forward. It seemed to unfold, like a shadow, suddenly remembering it had a shape. Donovan grabbed my jacket and literally yanked me back into the hallway. We both fell. He kicked the panel shut, and almost at the same moment something heavy hit it from the other side. Once, twice, 3. We slammed it down with my hall closet, then with a table. The pounding went on for about 3 minutes, then it stopped. Donovan sat on the floor, ashen white. "You're moving out today," he said. "What was that?" He didn't answer. "What was that?" He looked at the panel, behind which silence fell again. "After the fire," he said slowly. "The firefighters couldn't figure out why the apartment inside looked bigger than it was supposed to be. The plans didn't add up. The hallway went on longer than the structure of the house allowed. There seemed to be one more room, and in every photograph from the scene, there was something extra in the background. Not a person, not furniture, something standing where the space should have ended." I was silent. A firefighter said he heard voices from the apartment after everyone was evacuated. He was answered from inside when he called out, but when they went in a second time, no one was there. Only the apartment didn't look the same. It was a little different every time. And the family? Officially missing. Unofficially, he swallowed. Not all doors lead to where they're supposed to. I did leave that day. Before evening, before I had even packed half my things, I just rented a car, dropped off the essentials, and drove to the hotel. Before I left, I saw Mary for the last time. She was standing behind the counter and didn't even look surprised. "You knew," I said. She nodded. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because then you wouldn't have rented the apartment, and the owner would have sold the whole floor if he could. People move if they don't ask too many questions. And many did." Mary stared at me for a long time. 3 of them started to hear the knock over the years. 2 left on time, 1 didn't. "What does no mean?" She tilted her head. "He opened it." My whole body sank. And what happened? The next morning his apartment was found empty, but his things were still there, and his shoes were by the door, as if he had just come home. I left, without saying goodbye. 5 months had passed. I rented another apartment in a different neighborhood. A normal house, normal neighbors, a normal hallway with no extra doors. For a while I even managed to convince myself that everything was behind me. That the old house, fatigue, lack of sleep, other people's stories, all of this together just made my head spin. Until the calls started. At 3:13 a.m., my phone lit up without sound. An unknown number. A different one every night. I didn't answer. For the 4th time, I couldn't stand it and picked up the phone. There was silence for a few seconds. Then the familiar hiss of the TV. Then a child's voice. "You moved in wrong." I couldn't breathe. "What?" "You shouldn't have left through your own door." And the call ended. I changed my number. A week later, I found a piece of paper in the mailbox of the new apartment. No envelope. Inside was a single line, "We saved your place across from us." That same evening, I couldn't take it anymore and went to Graymont. I don't know why. Maybe to finish it. Maybe to make sure the house was demolished. That all this was impossible. There were construction fences at the entrance. A notice hung on the facade. The house was declared an emergency, scheduled for demolition. They didn't let me in. I went across the street and stared at the 6th floor for a long time. Most of the windows were dark, broken, or covered with shields, but one window was lit. It was exactly where apartment 6C should have been. I took out my phone and zoomed in as close as I could. There was a figure standing in the window. This time I saw it more clearly. Not a woman. Not a man. Not anything that could be called normal. She was too tall, too narrow, and behind her in the room there was a space that could not fit within the boundaries of the house. A long corridor that went somewhere deep, further, as if beyond the apartments, beyond the walls, beyond the facade itself. And there, in that impossible corridor, there were more doors burning. Many doors, all facing each other, all with thin strips of light beneath them. My camera focused. There was a number on one of the doors. 6B. I put down the phone. The light in the window went out, and almost immediately my own phone vibrated in my hand. An unknown number. I knew what I was going to hear even before I answered. A soft male voice said, "You're still standing across the street." It was almost like an invitation. After that, I moved cities. I changed jobs. I don't live higher than the 3rd floor. I never look through the peephole after midnight. And I always check how many doors there are in the hallway before signing a lease. But the worst happened last week. I got home around 2 a.m. Tired, wet from the rain, with packages in my hands. I entered my entrance, climbed the stairs, reached my floor, and froze for a second. There was a door across from my apartment. I live at the end of the hallway. There's always just a wall in front of me. But that night, there was a door. Dark gray. No number. No doorbell. And a thin strip of warm light was shining from under it. I stood there for a very long time, not moving. Then I slowly put the packages on the floor and took out my phone. The time was 3:12, and a second later, on the other side of the door, someone very politely knocked 3 times.